of the rim. Got it! Oh, the slam foul! Using Curry way downtown. Oh, what a shot from Curry!
Paul George has been an all-star 8 times throughout his NBA career. He's consistently been one of the more fun players in the league to watch and one of its better two-way players. So when I go through the timeline of unfortunate events to occur in his career, it's not necessarily saying he's had an unfortunate career, he's been very blessed. But for the tier of player that he is, every time that he's been close to the top, something unfortunate has been waiting for him, just keeping him away from it. It's not too unlike Chris Paul's career in a way. So that's what I want to do in this video. Start from the beginning and show every place where his career was getting to a certain point and some twist of fate that blocked it from happening. Of course, players can really only control what they can control in their career, and it's much the same for you with sports betting. Speaking of which, shout out to the sponsor of this video, MyBookie. Make your March Madness a moneymaker with MyBookie. Getting started is easy. Visit MyBookie online and use promo code DOM2K to receive a deposit bonus up to $1,000. Grab your extra funds now, and for a limited time, claim a free entry into the 150,000 MyBookie Madness bracket contest for a chance at big money. If you're the type of guy who likes to fill out multiple brackets to get an advantage, you can do that too. The price of entry is less than an Uber, all for a shot at a life-changing amount of money. With so many brands to choose from, you need a platform that makes it simple to bet and win like MyBookie. Bet anything, anytime, anywhere with MyBookie. Let's take it from the top. Indiana really might have been able to take Miami early on if any of the development had went the way it was supposed to. Remember, PG didn't just appear. He was drafted to a team that already had a wing star in Danny Granger, who'd been an all-star just 1 year before he was drafted. In fact, in Granger's final days, they'd been able to take the Miami Heat to 6 games in the 2012 conference semifinals whilst Chris Bosh was out. It wasn't much, but that alone was enough to wonder how much better the Pacers could have been in later years with an even halfway healthy Granger as George got better. Of course, you could also argue he doesn't break out there if Granger's role in the offense doesn't fall to him. Either way, it doesn't stop there because it's also about the timing of Granger's exit. Those knee troubles hadn't even become a critical concern up until that 2012 series against the Heat. Because of that, when they had a chance to draft Kawhi Leonard, they certainly needed a reliable point guard more than they needed another wing. Thus, one of the greatest small forwards of all time was merely selected by the Pacers as a formality before being traded to the Spurs. This meaning that they missed an opportunity to totally replace Granger and build with youth by barely a year. Thus, Paul George was left to take on the Heat the next 2 seasons with a good team no doubt, but whilst being the only legit wing threat outside of Lance Stevenson. A good, fun player, but when the options included Danny Granger and Kawhi Leonard, that stings to look back at. Still, the Pacers were overall a very solid unit, and were really only one player away from getting to that next level. That's another reason why it hurt so bad that as soon as LeBron left Miami, George will go on to sustain one of the most gruesome injuries of all time in what amounted to a pickup game during the offseason. Not only would this go on to affect the entire trajectory of his career, in the short term, it put an end to the Pacers core that had been contending for the past 2 years. By the time he returned in 2016, the roster was a shell of itself, and it was ultra clear that before he returned to contending, he'd likely need to find a new team. But at least the injury hadn't ended his run as a star-level talent, seeing as how he returned with averages of 23, 7, and 4 with 2 steals a game. He wasn't all the way the same yet, but he wasn't finished either. In fact, he was good enough for the Thunder to take a stab at pairing him with Russell Westbrook in the wake of KD's departure. During his second season in OKC, he'd recovered so well through the years that there had actually been a push to make him the MVP. He'd have never won it over Giannis, but the fact that anyone could get through the psychological effects of an injury like his to play at that level again was baffling. Yet, as the career of Paul George has seemed to go, an unexpected high followed by some version of a nasty low. First, because I very nearly forgot it, this is where the legend of Playoff P would ensue. All that would follow was misery. During a 2018 regular season game, he and Joe Ingles got into a bit of a shoving match, nothing too serious. It just spiced things up a bit when the Thunder ran into the Jazz in the first round of the postseason. When asked about how to deal with rising star Donovan Mitchell, George responded, quote, "Y'all ain't met Playoff P yet, huh?" Now, it doesn't matter how lighthearted that was or what he was actually referring to. The soundbite was him giving himself a nickname, and players in general very rarely ever successfully give themselves nicknames. Those are usually bestowed upon them. He played well in game 1 and even took to jawing at Joe Ingles after a made 3 to raise the stakes in the first quarter. It more or less went downhill from there. 2 things happened. 1, Joe Ingles got the best of Paul George in a few moments of that series in which he shot a blazing 47% from 3, meanwhile PG did not play as well as he could have. Number 2, OKC lost. So if I can explain that any clearer, the way people took it for trolling purposes was that PG's op was a role player in a first round out after he nicknamed himself. You never nickname yourself, it's the gateway to being endlessly trolled. It also didn't help that Joe Ingles resembled much more of an LA Fitness hooper than an NBA player. From going toe to toe with LeBron to losing in a series involving trash talk with Joe Ingles, who pretty much lit the team up from three, just none of it was a good look. And so, moving on, yes, as mentioned, 2019 was a very nice regular season campaign for him, the high, of course, followed by the low.
Lillard, long range three. It's good! Are you kidding me?
This isn't to pin that loss on PG or anything, because his performance really wasn't that far off from what he'd done in the regular season, but as I've so often said on this channel, everything in life is optics. And getting gamed for the series with one of the most vicious buzzer beaters of all time, whilst calling it a bad shot less than an hour later, with the fact that this was the second first round out in 2 seasons, the optics were less than stellar. Yet again, that nickname, Playoff P. Following that up with 2 disappointing exits was just never gonna go down easy regardless of how well he played. So the whole Thunder experiment didn't just not work out, it straight up failed. But at least there were no solid expectations in the first place, given that the Warriors were still around and PG and Westbrook were just a watered down version of KD and Westbrook. However, this next move to Los Angeles was full of them. It was unexpected given that he just signed a max extension the summer before with the Thunder, but boy was it exciting. At long last, the dream wing duo between he and Kawhi. What could go wrong now? Well, for starters, in 2020 when the league got forced into the bubble, he was a part of one of history's greatest meltdowns as the Clippers would fall to Denver after leading 3-1, while all but having Game 5 in the bag. It particularly hurt because the Clippers were one of the favorites to win the title that year, and had mostly lived up to that bill during the regular season. But no worries, right? After all, the bubble had some grueling circumstances, and PG himself attested to the mental health effect it had on some of the players. Plus, he and Kawhi would have plenty of cracks at this, the next of which would come in the 2021 campaign. The Clippers would be relatively successful again and look to have an even stronger chance as the Lakers were knocked off due to injury. Unfortunately, so were they. In a year in which I'm completely convinced they'd have won if healthy, his running mate Kawhi partially tore his ACL on the way to the conference finals. To drive the knife even deeper, PG impressively led the charge against the Suns, taking them 6 games, the literal brink of his first NBA Finals appearance. If they wouldn't have won the finals with Kawhi, I'm pretty sure they would have at least made them. Unfortunately, it would just have to wait. How long? We've still got no clue. Kawhi sustained that injury so late in the year that it forced him out of the 2022 campaign, prematurely ending any thoughts of another finals run. On top of that, PG had his own ailments that ultimately led them to falling to the play-in, where they failed to qualify for the postseason at all. And then there's the present day. Despite the rough patches all throughout the season, the Clippers had begun to hit their stride a bit. PG and Kawhi were healthy, the roster is as versatile as ever, and they were recently flirting with the possibility of being a 3rd seed. In this particular game, Paul George was rocking. Late in this one against OKC, he cut to the rim and pulled out something we didn't fully know he was still capable of.
4:25 to play. George. Oh my goodness! A swiveling Skywalker. George with the flush.
Yet, as the story has been so many times throughout his career, a high followed by a devastating low.
And lets it fly from 17. The shot is short. George goes down. A whistle, I believe a loose ball foul will be called before the basket from Dort.
He was bothered on that one. Oh, yeah. Yep.
Luckily, as I write this, George is recovering from the injury on a 2 to 3 week timeline for something that fully looked like it could have cost him a whole year. Either way, a scary knee injury for a player that already psychologically recovered from something even worse, this close to the playoffs. It's hard to imagine why these things happen to him and the Clippers every time there seems to be light at the end of the tunnel. This comes at a time in the season where Kawhi and PG were finally playing some pretty regular minutes together. They were looking how we imagined they would. And now their hopes at a title hinge on Paul George coming back very quickly from a gruesome looking injury, fully healthy, and then just having to hope they can adjust on the fly as opposed to figuring things out at the end of the season, coming into the playoffs on their P's and Q's, and finally just having a healthy, uninterrupted run. But that's just it. That's one of the things that's made his career so unfortunate. If he has had some healthy, uninterrupted run, something else stupid has just been waiting to happen right around the corner. So the best we can do is hope that the buck stops here. With a glimmer of hope, he has avoided serious injury, but as stated, he does remain out for the rest of the regular season. Yet the West is still so wide open in my eyes that if he's able to get back in round 1, there is still a chance. So fingers crossed, maybe this is where the unfortunate events stop. I think he's past due taking that next step in his career, and without something happening every single time he was right there, he'd have been there already. So wishing him and the Clippers the best of luck. Let me know what you think about it in the comment section below, and afterwards be sure to hit the like button and subscribe because we're very close to 400k, while also hitting the bell next to my name if you want notifications every time a new video drops. Appreciate you all watching, and I'll see you on the next one.